Okay, so we've got this great panel on transitioning from mobile AR to device AR. And I just want to tell everyone I'm practicing for the magic leap. Like, I've got glasses, I've got some device, and I've got a big pack that I'm carrying with me in my jacket. Okay, so let's start with introductions. So please give us a quick introduction, who you are, what you're working on, and then we'll get straight into the panel for the audience.
Sure. My name is Byron Seef. I'm here from Vancouver with the delegation, and I come from a company called Biba. We work on mobile games for a smart playground environment and using AR sort of incentives to get kids playing out in the real world.
Hey, I'm Peter Wittig. I'm also from Vancouver, here with the delegation, and we make a platform for building location-based AR experiences, things that happen out in the real world, online authoring tool, and Unity templates that connect into that.
So I'm not Barry O'Neill, I'm Patrick Ollila. I'm standing in for Barry because he's not here. I run Dreams. We're primarily a VR studio, but we've been playing around with AR. We've done some HoloLens work, we've done some stuff with Microsoft MR, and also looking at AR designs and prototypes as well. So it's an area that we're very interested in.
Okay, great. And Mark Ollila at UXFit. It's a consulting company working on advisory and board positions. One of the companies on the board of is the company Blind Squirrel that actually did the Star Wars lightsaber game for Disney for the Lenovo release. And prior to that, I had about 8 or plus years at Nokia Microsoft working in AR, VR, and activities like that. So this brings up to the question, like, what are you guys thinking device AR actually is? Or what is mobile AR to you, and what is device AR? Quick thoughts.
Sure, I'll pick it up. I'll state from the beginning that we take kind of a contrarian view to all of this. I mean, we develop with mobile AR first. The user is the parent, and the incentives are geared towards the kids. But for us, it doesn't really matter how that's delivered. A device just happens to be the format that it is at the moment. The contrarian view on shifting to device AR would be we would never want to set up our environment specifically with the kids where it would rely on headsets for the kids to be the incentive. So that would be quite a barrier for us moving forward. I see device AR as, the talk before, transitioning to something really unique on the consumer side that becomes easy to integrate into everyday life.
Mobile AR to me is using the device that everyone's carrying in their pocket to augment reality in some way, whether visually or with sound. And secondly, device AR to me will be, those things like Magic Leap or the glasses that everyone seems to be waiting for of some variety or another. That's what I see those as.
Yeah, and I think for me the big differences are when you're using mobile VR, you're touching the screen primarily as a control input, and you're not seeing things from a first-person point of view. And what excites me about device AR is that you can potentially be able to use your hands to track and gesture and interact as opposed to touching a screen, and also hopefully you'll be able to see things from a first-person point of view, which opens up loads of ideas for different games and experiences that you can do that are harder to do when you're actually holding a phone.
So we've got today, like, mobile AR. Fundamentally, we're sort of agreeing that it's these devices, iPhones, Android devices, so forth, and maybe we add some sort of accessory which allows this to become a headset or some form, or we can use a mobile VR, a VR 360 experience and so forth, just by looking at it and interacting with the device or moving the device with the accelerometers. What do you think is the technologies or the companies today that are actually working on device AR? Which are the ones that we need to look at and watch closely? The device AR companies?
I mean, outside of the ones that have been spoken about all day, right? It's the HoloLens of who knows what's happening behind those doors. There was something said earlier on today that I thought was really fascinating, and Google releasing the glass, and it sort of failed, right? And then moving into a few years, and as it starts to be adopted into other technologies, like you stated, everyone's waiting for the glasses. Well, the glasses came, and then nothing happened. So
how many people in the audience have glasses, or is it about 50% at the moment? Who doesn't need to wear glasses at the moment?
To see.
To see.
Yeah.
It's about 30% of the audience. Okay, fair enough.
But for me, the Google Glasses weren't AR. You see, I mean, they were drawing something on top of everything, which for me is, for me, AR is depth, it's sensing, it's being able to interact with the
So
environment.
not overlays?
It's not overlays, I don't think. So that's what I would call a proper device AR, is when you can scan the room, you can create a 3D model of it, and your software can interact with that, and you have characters running behind things, things being displayed on objects, on walls.
So then would you class then the HoloLens as the first AR device?
Yeah, I think so for me,
Yeah. So just probably, how many people have actually had the experience of using a HoloLens? Hands up. Okay, about less than 30% in the room. So the HoloLens experience is fundamentally, you put the headset on. It's a standalone headset. There's no cables or anything like that. All the computing power is in the headset. And what's impressive about it is that you can basically, through the operating system they've provided in the headset, you can drag like windows and attach them to a wall. So you could have a YouTube window on the wall, you could have Netflix window, you could have music window. You could also put 3D holograms and place them on tables and move around them. And it doesn't have GPS built into the device, but what it has is basically 3D pattern recognition. So it builds up a local geometry of where everything it's looking at in the room. So you can walk around these objects and see them and so forth. So it's very, very powerful. However, it is limiting because the view is very small in terms of what you can actually see. So that's from Microsoft. So have you guys been working with that at all in some experiments for mobile AR?
We have, we've used our platform in relation with HoloLens as well. It's just a question of, who's paying for what. And if there's someone comes to us with a project that is funded and says, we want to do this with HoloLens, we'll do it. But, I suppose what we target is the thing that people have in everyone's pocket. Because for now, the lessons you learn on that are going to be transferable to those other devices once they come along.
So then that comes to the question then, like, what's considered then, like, I think Patrick's point about distinguishing between Google Glasses and HoloLens per se as, okay, one's really, the HoloLens is device AR, Google Glass was not, as basically overlays and so forth. What are the technologies that you consider is required to actually have the minimal viable product for device AR? Patrick?
Go ahead.
I would say, for me, full 3D, 6 degree of freedom, 6 of tracking, and that's ideally for inside-out tracking rather than external sensors. So
inside-out tracking?
Inside-out tracking, so you can track your position, rotation, movement. And I think, for me, being able to scan the room and have a sense of the 3D shape of objects and walls and things is a key part of that. So it's not just overlay, it's actually interacting with the environment. And also, I kind of love the idea of using your hands to control. So being able to, with the HoloLens, you can kind of shrink and touch and push your hands, fingers together to interact and click, but there's no reason why you can't even have motion controls like the Oculus, the VR headsets have, which track your hands, or just do proper hand tracking using a lead motion or that sort of interface.
So then, are you then considering the HoloLens as the MVP?
I think so. I think it's the first. I mean, there are lots of issues, the field of view being a very big one, but I think it's, for me, the first consumer AR device, I think, and hopefully Magic Leap will take it forward.
Which I thought was fascinating when you discover that it doesn't have a GPS in it. So the minimum viable product, mobile device AR is fundamentally not requiring a GPS.
I agree that all that stuff is really impressive, and if you're doing a visual sense, I do think augmented reality can be sound as well. So, if you have spatial sound and located sound that is, as you're walking through a place, you hear someone whisper in your left ear, and it's, it's not really there, but it's, using a positioning of some sort. I would consider that augmented reality, and that's something that people can use right now. So it's either sound, visual, one of the two, or a combination of the both, or both.
Okay. What about for yourself?
I mean, you touch on it in such a great way, right? It's that augmented experience on a device is limiting for so many different reasons. I do agree with your HoloLens being possibly the first consumer-driven product that's really going to get out there and break a lot of legs for people, but it's an interesting time as well with ARKit and ARCore. The functionality that will allow developers still on a device to be able to integrate into a much more meaningful way, I think that's going to break a lot of barriers that might remove some of those preconceptions about what that means, right? I've already seen development where using those kits in a much more meaningful way, the characters are positioned in real life on that device, and it feels really natural.
Yeah.
So I think that right there, you don't need to be immersed in anything.
I think there's a real trend, and we've seen that today through some of the talks actually, where some people are going, oh, AR, it's not going to be around till you get device AR, we're not interested in it now. And actually, there is a market, ARKit and ARCore, as it comes out, going to be huge markets with lots of devices, and you do brilliant stuff on it. Just because it doesn't do everything, just because it doesn't do what Magic Leap may or may not do, doesn't mean it's not an incredibly great introduction, a great way to learn how to develop for AR as well.
So, do you expect that there's going to be a content transformation between going from mobile AR to device AR? Is there going to be differences, or is it just going to be the same?
Visually, you can do some things, but again, I mean, I think that the content itself, if it's not incorporating some element of reality, it's not AR. So, I mean, you need to say, I'm going to contrast or complement something that exists in the physical world. And so if you can do that in a meaningful way with mobile versus, you're going to get a better rendering or better positioning maybe with the device stuff. But, I think to me, the visual element that you make must be incorporated into what you're actually seeing in real life. And I think that skill will be transferable from one to the other. And it's just a question of how well is it rendered.
So what do you consider then the barriers to entry for device AR?
I think through the content lens, it becomes a really interesting perspective because, like what was said before, one of the breakthrough periods will happen through entertainment, and I do believe that. It's not going to be anything immersive of some sort of a weird experience, or you're seeing some interesting stuff in sports. But what's great about content, and specifically when you start to license animated characters, it allows an opportunity to add those experiences without needing to adhere to reality in any real way, right? You take whatever sort of cartoon characters and place it through an immersive AR experience, and it can still feel natural and not be 100% congruent with reality. And I think for that reason, the entertainment side of it is a really easy barrier to cross and get into that experience.
So then that's like going into the aspect of like when Google Glass came out, even though I think as a panel agreed that that wasn't true mobile AR, I'm assuming the other panelists have gone with that. It started off very much fashion orientated in its launch, and then now it's relaunch, it's more industrial focused and so forth. So what do you expect the industries to be for device AR to take off? Like, is it going to be industrial first, or do you think fashion to be the one that brings it into mainstream?
I think it's, at the moment with HoloLens, it is B2B. It's all B2B. That's a big focus, which makes sense because it's an expensive piece of kit. It's not a consumer price. Be interested to see what Magic Leap do. They seem to be positioning it as a consumer device right from everything we've seen, but I do wonder whether the price point might limit its mass market adoption. I think it's going to be the first, maybe it'll be the first AR device targeted at consumers, but whether it's going to be priced at a sensible price to
what do you expect it to be priced at?
That's a good question.
Actually, that's a good question for all the panel. I wish I had a pen. You could write it down, and then we could read out the numbers. What's your expectation?
I reckon it's probably going to be $999.
Okay, Peter?
Yeah, I'd say it's going to be equivalent to a high-end smartphone at whatever year it comes out.
Yeah. Like you stole my punchline. That was going to be the follow-up.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree. I'll take the other side of the flip and say $1,099 just because why not?
Yeah. So fundamentally, like a fully maxed out iPhone 10 or something like that is the price that it could, like you were expecting. Okay, so does that then give us a scenario that are we ending up in a future where this device as we know it today disappears and is replaced by some sort of multiple devices which form a device AR solution?
It's a really interesting question, especially through the lens of this device in and of itself was an amalgamation of a whole lot of devices, right? So then to move the next step and then break that out again, possible. I really couldn't say. Yeah.
You could do a lot right now. So if you get a new Apple Watch and you've got the GPS in there and you've got the SIM card and you've got the earbuds and the phone's in the pocket and that's kind of powering it. But think about if you use Siri to read your text, to make texts, to make calls, to ask for directions, to do navigation. How often do you actually have to pull your phone out of your pocket to do all the things you need to do?
Yeah.
Not much. So, you know, I think it's a transition to say, like, you know, what's it gonna, it's getting people comfortable doing something that they normally do in a different way, which takes a long time, I have to say.
So does that then bring up the thought then that, I think in the last presentation there was a comment about what actual AR means, and I think 2017, 2016 was a year where voice UIs, voice UX suddenly started to come out with Siri, but particularly with Alexa, making inroads into the home and actually delivering a really transformative experience in the kitchen and so forth along those lines. So that are we being so fixated that AR is a visual augmentation that the device AR of the future actually is very much driven by voice and those interactions and sound? Like, what's your comments and thoughts about that?
I don't think it's going to be voice. I think voice works for the home, but you know, if you're in a train, you're wandering around, you're in a tube, it just doesn't make sense. For me, some of the patents that are being issued out there in the AR space give a bit of an idea, and I think for me the dream is a pair of glasses like Byron's wearing, but with the ability to scan through whatever you're using, fibre optics, and to be able to do eye tracking, because I think the ultimate input device is for you to be able to look at items in front of you and stare at it, for it to select and do stuff. So I actually think that eye tracking is most likely to be the predominant interface in once we get to
Can
the
you
device.
elaborate on your concern about the train? Like, what's that use case?
So I just think, you know, I'm in a busy tube going into London and I'm going, oh, Siri, tell me, Google, what am I going to do there? And there's a noise going on and everyone's looking at me like, you know, if everyone's talking, everyone's interfacing with their device by talking, that's just horrible. I just don't, you know, I don't see voice as being a use case that works everywhere. It works at the home when you're quiet. I wouldn't do it in the office. I wouldn't, you know, control my phone in the office when there's other people around. Maybe that's just me. So intuitively, it doesn't feel to me like the right control interface for the future. And therefore, I think you have to look at alternatives. You may be hand tracking, touching, but again, eye tracking is such a simple, proven interface that I think that will be great.
I think your comment made me remind myself of how old I am, and like living in Sweden and Finland last century or into the turn of the century, and when mobile was booming and then Bluetooth headsets started to appear, and then people were walking down the park talking to themselves, and you're wondering, are they loonies, are they crazies, or who are they talking to, and all that. And then just wondering, like, is that just a behavioural change that the generation goes through, that, oh yeah, they're just talking to someone on the phone. And then this other aspect of like what is it, like teenagers and millennials now are going to discos where there's no music actually getting played loud. They turn up with their headsets and they're just dancing to their own music. And okay, so that's also something that needs to be considered, is the behavioural change that goes through here. So I'm going to open up the panel to the audience now to get some questions and so forth. So who's going to be the first questionnaire? I see someone at the back putting a hand up. Do I have to randomly say names and you'll need to ask a question?
I bet Bertie's got a question.
Great.
Like the HoloLens. Just a quick question. The HoloLens, I was wondering what you feel would be the next device that will topple that what will come out after the HoloLens? Will there be a HoloLens 2? Or will there be another device from another market, from another company somewhere? Just a quick question.
I think for me, it's the Magic Leap 1. It's probably the next big iteration, I hope. But there's so much mystery around it that it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, there's Microsoft has licensed that technology to a number of companies, and so you know, like Dell and I think Acer and a few more are making their own versions of that. So I'm interested to see what kind of add-ons or what direction they take those, and maybe to accentuate certain features versus others.
And Microsoft is very much driving mixed reality driven by PC at the moment, or VR on Windows is a big push. And I believe they've talked about possibly a consumer version of the HoloLens sometime in the future, but not necessarily now. But as mentioned, the current version is very much enterprise focused.
I think the big companies to look out for is Apple. You know, with ARKit, they've made a big statement about AR, and I believe that, I may well be wrong, but I believe that when they can do AR glasses properly, they will blow everyone away with what they deliver. And I think there's a lot of people there working on it, I suspect.
Yeah.
They just bought a Canadian company.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Next question. We've had one from this side of the room, now this side.
I've got a question in a can.
Okay,
If that'll do in the meantime.
get over into that side though. Okay, good. Okay,
Is that
great.
allowed?
Yeah, now that's allowed.
All right. So then, I'll pretend I'm a real audience member. So, augmented reality headsets or glasses. You've got one on. You're in a bright room. How'd you deal with that?
Very good optics.
But how did we get there?
Research.
I don't know enough about it, but I read the really interesting article about the Magic Leap, conjecturing at what they're using, and it's to do with glass with technology within it that actually allows it to alter and refract the wavelengths of the light. And so very, very smart glass with the ability to modulate and do stuff. So theoretically, that glass should be able to go black. A pixel should be able to go black, which means that then you could. It's a big issue. If you're outside, you're going to have the ability to darken pixels effectively. Otherwise, everything's going to be faded out. Everything's going to be ghostly. I haven't seen that tech yet, but that's going to be fascinating.
It's one of the reasons why the HoloLens doesn't have GPS. Like they said, no, this isn't going to be an outside device. It's going to be an inside device. Okay. Next question.
It's a really good question. Right?
Last question.
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming, by the way.
What's your favourite colour?
Oh, God.
Seriously, does anyone have a final question?
Okay, I've got a question for the audience then. Hands up if you would be willing to spend, what was it, $999 on a Magic Leap 1. Subsidised by an operator, if it has.
Exactly.
Okay, so you'd happily go for an iPhone 10, but not a Magic Leap 1.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, let's thank our panelists.
Yeah, thanks, man.